Our core focus here at Caveo, really, we look at our passion is wrapped around empowering L&D to deliver business value back to the organization. That is really at the core of everything that we do. The way that we look at it is we really look at providing learning strategies and solutions to help drive performance inside the organization. So really empower those folks to be able to perform at the levels that the business needs to perform so they can, again, drive business value back into the organization. When we talk about strategy, there's really two different types of strategy that we're talking about to be able to support the business as a whole. So the first is really the program strategy, or what we call the little s. It's really where you start to look at your programs, the different programs inside the organization, the smaller initiatives that you have, to really put together a strategy that helps them be able to understand the goals that you're trying to accomplish, as well as how you're going to get through it, how you're going to achieve those goals. And then there's the larger S, which is the organizational strategy. So looking at your organization as a whole and saying, how do we provide strategic direction to the L&D team? How do we define what it is L&D will provide back to the organization? How are you going to support the organization? How are you going to enable the corporate goals and the overall direction of the business, really within that larger S? That's where we're going to be focusing on how you can really be able to do both in here. But this really talks more about how you're going to align to really the bigger S types of things. How are you going to impact the organization from an L&D's perspective? Why is it important that we define the strategy? This is one of the things that I think a lot of the folks in L&D really struggle with, is saying, why is it important that we really talk strategy, both internally and with our business partners? First, it really defines how the L&D team will support the overall vision and mission of the organization. So it defines to the rest of the business and to your internal folks, what is it that you're going to do to help stand up the rest of the organization? L&D is a support organization, so how are we going to support the business achieve its goals and objectives? It defines really how you're going to work and engage with the business. So what are the types of things that you're going to do to help better integrate in with the business? How are you going to work with them? What are the types of things you're going to work with them on? How are you going to engage with them? And at what level are you going to engage? Also with team alignment, so it allows the team to understand where you're heading as an organization. What is it that they're responsible for doing with the business, and what the overall approach is to learning and development. So how is it that they're going to do what they do to support the business? So how do they, their day-to-day things that they do, how does that align to really achieving the overall business goals and objectives? And then lastly, it really defines the L&D promise. And this is something that I think a lot of organizations kind of tend to gloss over, which is really defining very clearly what you're promising back to the stakeholders, the leaders, and the employees of the business. So what are you going to do to help the business achieve its goals and objectives? And then lastly, it defines as much of what you will do as what you will not do. That's equally as important. So when you look at what it is that you're going to do for them, but it's really, where else are you going to say no? So where are you not going to apply L&D? Where are the areas that you are not going to support the business? And that is critically important, so that your organization doesn't get pulled into other areas where it just really eats up your resources, eats up all of your time in areas that are not driving really the strategic goals and the strategic direction that you want to take your business. So designing and implementing really an effective, sustained strategic success. And we look at this really from the inside out. So when you look at creating your overall strategy, you want to start at the vision generation. So you want to talk about what are the handful of beliefs, your guiding principles, the tenets that you are absolutely non-negotiable to the rest of the business, to your organization. What are the things that you will not deviate from? So the best way to think about this is think about your personal core values. So what are the characteristics that you could not personally live without? What are the things that are so impactful to you as a person that you will not deviate from? So mine are really, when I look at it, it's persistence, honesty, and trust are my core tenets. Those are my core values that I hold very closely, that I will not break. So you have to think about, from your organizational standpoint, what are those core tenets that you will not deviate from? When you look at your organization's core values, it's really your brand and your brand promise. So what is the value that you're going to provide? When you look at the value generation, so you're taking your vision, now you want to translate it into the value. From, just as an illustrative model here, from Caveo's perspective, we have 5 core values that we really look at, that we project back. Not only internally do we look at, but we also project it externally, which is imagination of what's possible, the determination to never settle for second, the conviction in the rewards of learning, commitment to the journey, and the passion to transform the industry. And this is really, truly, when you look at it, it's who you are as an organization. So from an L&D standpoint, it's who you are, not what you strive to be. So it's really hard. You have to look into the mirror and really say, what are you as an organization? And that's really your core values that you provide back, and that's your core tenet that you have as an organization. So we get into then start talking about what is the purpose that you're looking at. So the purpose that you have is really that guiding star that you have, that you're always pushing the organization towards. It's what's the purpose of your business being part of the business? So what's that value there? And it directs the organization and really determines who fits inside of your organization. So when you have your values, you want to take that and compare people against the values, and that becomes part of your core purpose. It allows you to see who fits in the organization, and it's really the measuring stick that you have that all of your decisions are really measured by. So what is it that you're going to provide, and what is it that you're not going to provide? When you're looking at creating your operational strategy, you have to really look at the 7 core capabilities. So this is our maturity models as we work with organizations on helping them build their strategy and look at really what are the areas that they need to focus on from a strategic standpoint. Everything is really revolves around, are you creating the true business value back to the organization? And you want to make sure that those 7 core capabilities are really something that you focus on a regular and consistent basis. So are you well aligned to the business? What's your measurement and evaluation strategy that you have in place? That measurement and evaluation strategy will allow you to expose data that will allow you to make good business decisions around your process, around your finance and planning, your forecasting and demand management. Is your organizational structure aligned in a way that allows you to better interact with the business, in a way that they need you to interact with them? So are you truly, working with the business on a regular and consistent basis? Forecasting and demand management, that really gets around, do you understand what the business need is here in the next quarter, in the next, over the next year, and looking at your utilization to make sure that your team, the resources that you have, can meet the demand and the forecast of the business. Team alignment and operational excellence is really driven by a clearly defined strategy. So when you look at things that need to align, you have to have your goals and objectives. So how the team's activities really relate to L&D and the business goals. So it's what are their goals and objectives, how does it align, how are their day-to-day function really going to align with how the business is operating. So they can say, what I'm doing now is going to directly impact the business. Performance standpoint, so what is your standard operating procedure, processes, roles, responsibilities, and what are the internal initiatives that you have to continue to improve and push your efficiency and effectiveness of your organization forward, because that will then start to dictate the internal initiatives if everybody's understanding what needs to be done. And really importantly is really the accountability and the kind of the performance management side. So what are the goals, the measurements, and the priorities of each team member, and how are you coaching and developing them to be able to really drive their performance in the right level? You take these 3 components and you really drive them up, and to create that level of operational excellence, to be able to drive the innovation, the continuous improvement that's needed so that you can continually support the business as it evolves, you're evolving your business to meet. So gaining buy-in from leadership. When you start to develop your strategy, you have to have, and we'll first talk about what is your value proposition. So what is it why should somebody work with your organization versus going external versus creating their own? And that's a big piece. There's a lot around marketing that you're going to have to do, a lot around communications that you need to do as an L&D organization. You have to consistently communicate your value proposition back to the organization. So as part of that is you have to really talk about how relevant you are to the business. So how your solution or expertise really improves or resolves the current situation the business finds themselves in or the stakeholder finds themselves in. You need to make sure that consistently work with your stakeholders in the business to uncover, to find realized or unrealized needs that the business has. So part of it is you have to be able to go back to the business and consult with them on a regular basis to identify really performance gaps that they're having and how you can help them define what the true need is and the true outcome so that you can remain relevant within the business. Also along that is what is the perceived value of what you have to offer. So by engaging you early in the process, when there's an issue identified or strategic goal and objective identified, what is the value of bringing you into the organization or into the program or the project? When I think about this, there was my favorite quote that I've ever heard from a senior leader around L&D had to do with the perceived value of the offering that L&D provided. It's almost comical, but it was, I have no idea what they do, but whenever I engage them, the results are phenomenal. And that's really what you want to be able to hear from your stakeholders. It doesn't matter if they understand truly what it is that you do. As long as you're involved early and you can show that you're providing value to the business, you'll be engaged early and often. And then how are you differentiating? So what's your differentiation for people wanting to engage with you? That is a critical piece. And then lastly, of course, is what is their sense of urgency that they have? So there has to be a sense of urgency, otherwise they're not going to want to work with you. If you look to the handout that we have for you, we're going to start to talk through really how to create a value proposition. So it's critical to understand how to create that overall value proposition, because this is one of the things that you're going to market and communicate back to the business. We'll walk through this a little bit slowly. I'll give you some opportunity to think about it, and then I'll share with you what Caveo's value proposition as we go through this process. So the first thing really is your value statement. So if you go to page 2 of the worksheet, you're going to see the value statement itself. So what is the benefit your organization offers? So what is the true benefit of working with your organizations? Caveo's value statement is really part of our tagline. So we talk about that what we provide to organizations is really performance at a higher level. So when people ask us what is it that we do, we work with organizations to help their organizations perform at a higher level. That's what we do. That's our value statement when we start to look at it. The next step you need to do in creating your value proposition is what is the unique offering? So provide really an explanation of what you offer and why it's useful, really in 2 to 3 sentences. So what are some of the things that you offer to the organization? And this is really kind of the features and benefits that your organization offers. So from Caveo's perspective, when we look at the L&D, the unique offering we provide strategic and transformational initiatives, instructional design and development, and then managed services and outsourcing. Those are the 3 unique offerings of many, but those are the main 3 unique offerings that we provide to our clients. So when people come to us, they say, you know, what's your unique offering? Those are the 3 main areas that we look at. So the last thing in there in creating that is around the features and benefits. So what are the 3 benefits that someone would gain by working with your team within the business? So from a Caveo perspective, our customers appreciate the focus on delivering the most impactful, highest quality, and most innovative solutions to their business problems. We bring a unique perspective from defining and capturing the best practices from across multiple industries. So those are the features and benefits that organizations would get for working with us. And so when you look at your internal organization, you have to really start to think about what is it specifically that an organization would gain from working with your business. So what's your value statement, what's your unique offering, and what's your features and benefits? And this is really the beginning of creating your overall strategy and being able to project those things back as part of the business case. If you can't clearly articulate these things, then people will continually ask why you're there and what it is that, you know, what can they gain from engaging you in the process. The next thing is really talking about kind of team engagement. So team engagement, there are really, I know there's multiple models out there. There's lots and lots of models, and it's really is dependent on buy-in and belief, really kind of in 3 core areas, and a lot of things fall into these 3 areas. When you look at the values and purpose, so people need to believe in the values and purpose that the organization, and really from the standpoint of the L&D organization, provides. So this gets to the motivation, emotional and rational commitment, loyalty, and a sense of belonging really falls underneath that values and purpose. The leadership arm, so the next thing is really around their leadership. So it gets around their satisfaction, their development, their contribution. Are they truly appreciated for what they're doing? Are they being communicated to well? And overall stability of the organization. They want to make sure that they have that sense of belonging, but they also feel stable in what's going on around them. And then lastly, trust is really trusting that their peers, their leaders, and the organization will really do the right thing for the customers, the shareholders, and the employees, and will work together truly as a team. You want to make sure that as you're crafting those things, your value proposition, and you're creating your core values, you want to make sure that you're really focusing in and looking at those 3 core areas to be able to drive the team engagement. Let's get into building the business case. So this is kind of a high-level look first. We'll go through this. This is kind of the upfront pieces that you want to do before you're going to present back the business case to the organization. We'll get into what are the key categories that are part of creating the business case. First thing is you want to do your strategic planning, and this is really where you identify issues that are really preventing the L&D team from enabling the achievement of the organizational goals. So you want to look at internally, what is going on internally that is stopping your organization from being able to truly support and align with the business, as well as what are the business needs that they have, the evolving business needs, because we know as they plan early in the year, things change quarter to quarter. They change very quickly throughout the year. The next thing is you want to start to identify some ideas around what are some of the potential solutions to the identified gaps or the identified issues that you have with existing people, process, or technology. So I really kind of bucket the 3 problems really come in 3 things in business. So it's either around people, it's around process not working correctly, or it's around the technology. So it's starting to identify what are some of the core solutions that you have for the issues that you've identified. Then you want to take some time and do some research. So you want to research of those alternatives so that you can fully flush out what that process looks like. So, what are the process or technology? What is the time that's going to take, the cost? What are the pros and cons of each one of those different things that you have in there? So these are all part of things that you're going to start to roll into the overall business case that you're going to be bringing back to leadership. You want to conduct a detailed analysis. So, how feasible is it? Is this really more pie in the sky, or is this something that you can actually execute on? One of the things that we've seen over the years is that we see a lot of strategies that are very, I will affectionately say that they're very forward-thinking, meaning that the technology doesn't currently exist. There's no way to fully implement it, but it's a great idea, but it's not feasible to be able to do it at this point in time. So really, you want to make sure that it is feasible, it is relevant to the business and the organizational goals, and it can be executed on. That's a critical piece. The next thing you want to do is once you have all these things, you're going to want to find a business leader that is friendly to your organization so that you can bring the solution to them and really talk to them about it, flush it out in case there's any issues that you might have in there. Start to socialize what you're seeing. What this will allow them to do is if they really buy into it, you then create a business champion or sponsor as you start to build the business case. So this is very helpful when you have somebody on the business side be able to say, you know what, I totally agree with this, we need to move forward with this, and really becomes that driving force behind it. And then lastly is really developing the business case presentation with all the data to provide to leadership. And so now we're going to talk about what are the key core components within the business case itself. So as we look at those core components of the business case, so you see that there's really 6 major components. Now, a lot of people will ask, do you have to build that thick deck that you have? Do you have to really pull together some type of document? The quick answer is typically no. You don't have to. It's the construct in which to have a conversation. These are the things that you need to fully think through to be able to truly address all the business issues or the business questions that are going to come out. You need to consider really these following areas to answer the question and how it relates to each of these. The lens that the organizational leadership looks through is how and what you're going to do is going to really impact the business goals, the cost of the business, and the dividends to the business long term. Again, the whole fallacy behind it is it doesn't have to be that thick, tedious document created by a team of consultants in a language that really kind of makes you want to take a quick nap. It can be as simple as a PowerPoint deck. It can be as simple as just a quick Word document, and it really just becomes the construct in which to have the conversation. So when you approach a strategic initiative, it's important to consider that the strategy may not show an immediate impact, but show incremental gains over time. That's okay. And when other parts of the organization look to make a strategic change in direction to support a future vision or goals of the business, it's truly not done overnight. So you can really start to talk to them about providing this roadmap of incremental change, improve business capabilities, efficiency, and cost savings over time. It's important to realize that they don't truly expect things to be completed immediately. You can say, you know, here's what's going to happen and the timeline that they're going to see and realize the improvement. In the beginning, you want to tell your stakeholder to unveil of what the ask is of the discussion of the presentation. So it's really why would you do that? So typically people wait till the end, and if you've ever gone through one of these types of presentations and you get to the last slide with your ask and here's what it's going to cost and the options, and leadership will look at you and say, I'm sorry, can we go back to that other slide? It's because they didn't understand what it is that you wanted them to think about, to ask questions about. So they don't know what to listen for or the questions to ask, and is typically left frustrated or confused by the time they get to the end of the presentation. So it needs to be a robust discussion as you go through the presentation, because as you start to go through there, the conversation, it sets the tone, allows them to ask intelligent questions throughout the discussion, and it'll actually more often lead to yes, because you will have that open conversation. And there are many times where I don't even get all the way through the presentation where they completely understand where you're going, they want to engage, and it's just you move forward because you've done the ask up front, and then you start building the case around why they should say yes. L&D is really an internal services function to help drive the business priorities. So you're there to support and drive the business priorities. When you look at all of the organizations that L&D supports, everything from sales and marketing, operations, finance, accounting, IT, and so on, the primary activities that you look at is, what's the leadership pieces? What are how are you going to consult with the business? What's the instructional design strategy? What's the delivery? What's the reporting? And really driving the business priorities. So you need to really start to talk to them as you look at the business value. So how can you help them generate revenue, cut cost, improve performance? And that's the conversation you need to have with them, not talking in the language of L&D, but talking in the language of business. So when you're looking at what is it that you want to put out there, it's how your organization will align to stand up the overarching priorities. What will you enable or unlock? How do you prove it? What will you do to impact the metrics and measurement on their dashboards, not necessarily on yours? And what do you need to make it happen? So it's what do you need from them? Because as we go through this, it is basically you're creating a contract with them as you're going through kind of this whole strategy piece is, here's what I want to enable, here's what my team wants to enable and stand up to help you meet your goals, but also here's what I need from you as an organization. So the vision, the goals of the strategy must be clearly articulated. So when you look at, there are really the vision and the goals. So there's the external facing vision and goals. So what is the overall promise to the organization? What's the value proposition, the strategic direction? These are things that you need to share with the organization on a consistent and regular basis. What are you doing from your strategy standpoint to share with them, enable them to meet their goals? And that gets around the metrics and measurement. That gets around how you're supporting the business, how you're interacting with them. What it is that you're proposing will help them, so your external vision will help them better meet their business goals and objectives. And then there's the internal facing. So this is really something, and I'm going to go back to the whole vision piece here, is that this is something that you don't just kind of write up on a piece of paper and hang it up on the wall and everybody looks at it as they walk in. But it's something that the organization holds close to their heart. So it's their purpose for getting up every day and coming into work. And what you're doing externally is how are you helping them achieve their goals and objectives and increase performance and reduce expenses, and that's what your goals are. Internally, it's how are you doing that, and what are the key components and pieces you need to have in place to enable those things. So you have to have this like kind of an internal and external view. So when you're internally, you communicate it differently than when you're communicating externally. This is really the part of the discussion where the sales pitch is truly necessary, and you have to be able to do a very good sales pitch. So this is the salesy part of it. You need to have the leader understand why their strategic initiative is critical, not only to your success to support the business, but also how the initiative will be of critical importance to them achieving their business and divisional goals. So when you talk about it, it's not necessarily about consolidating LMS, taking a couple of LMS systems and consolidating them. It's really, you want to introduce a CMS to reduce development time and increase consistency of content. And what does that mean to their business? So you start to use their language around, yes, you want to implement a new CMS system, or you want to implement a new LMS system, or you want to work on your workflow or quality. But those are internal initiatives. So you can discuss with your team what those things mean. But externally, what does that mean to the business? So that your strategic initiatives that you put into place, you start to talk about, we want to improve the workflow. Well, it's to provide better predictability and consistency of content, results, performance, all of those types of things, so you can be more nimble. You can really align better to innovation within the group. So you have all of your different strategic initiatives. Then you look at what is the perceived value that the organization has. So how well did you provide them with what the perceived value is that they're going to get out of it? And then they're going to align the funding. So now the funding can be anything from the L&D transformation. It can be looking at knowledge management components, flow, new LMS, all those types of things. What it is that they want to fund, and part of it is there might be divergent initiatives. So if during these conversations you might find out that they're doing something that's going to impact what your strategy is, and so it'll cause to have some divergent initiatives. You'll get some funding for some of the things that you want, depending on how well you sell it to the organization. And then some of it might be pushed to next year. So it just may not be a priority this year based on where the organization is heading. The next thing is, what are the gaps and opportunities that you're trying to resolve? You have to really help them understand what is it that caused you to look at these items or opportunities. This is where you should come clean really about what it is that works inside your organization and what doesn't work inside your organization. Because they know, the people that you work with on a regular and consistent basis, they know where you're strong and where you're weak at. And it really lends credibility to you when you are honest about your gaps and opportunities and really discuss how you're going to address them. If everything is puppies and rainbows for you, if everything is perfect within your business, then why would they want to invest? So really looking at it from the standpoint of saying, where are our gaps and our opportunities, and how can we better support the business and their initiatives? Here are our gaps, here's what we want to do to improve, here's the benefit that you're going to realize, and here's what we need to do to get it done. Because when you come clean like that, you'll see people just kind of nod because they understand. I mean, their organizations aren't perfect either. But if you talk about how you want to incrementally improve, that goes an unbelievably long way with the business leaders inside the organization. Let's talk about metrics and measurement. Really, metrics and measurement is truly the key to gaining credibility within your organization. Your results, good or bad, so you have to communicate the bad results too, on a regular and consistent basis to let the leadership understand really the incremental results that are being achieved. These metrics should be jointly agreed to with the business leader or the stakeholder and tied directly to their dashboards. I know there's a lot of times that we tend to get kind of twisted up into a pretzel over the ROI metrics. Gary Schaefer recently just put out a great article about ROI and for learning leaders. It focuses on a couple of things. If you want to look at ROI, very simply, it's what are the key metrics that are important to the senior leader? How did they identify what the issue was? So when you start to talk to them, they had to look at their dashboard, or they had to have some way where they identified what the issue is. And so that if they can point at a metric or a measurement that they're currently utilizing that help them identify what that issue is, the next thing you want to do is really identify what impacts that metric, so good or bad, what's the underlying drivers of that metric. Those are the things that you want to look at. What is the business outcome you want to impact? So when you're looking at your business case, so what's the business outcome you're trying to really impact or move the needle on? What's the behavioral, technical, organizational change required to achieve it? So what do you need to do? What's the solution that you need to provide? What are the metrics related to that change? And that gets back to the dashboard. What business metrics are you trying to drive? what data points are needed to produce that dashboard. So again, you don't need to create a new dashboard. You want to make sure that you're utilizing the existing data that they're already comfortable with. So if they're comfortable with that data up front, there's going to be less questions around them saying, well, prove it, or prove those questions. And then lastly is, what's the overall cost of learning? If you utilize their metrics, it's okay to be able to have an approximation or an estimate. The rest of the business does that on a regular and consistent basis. So learning should be no different. If you utilize standard metrics that everybody can agree to, they will readily accept what it is that you come to the table with and how you helped impact that. You don't have to purely isolate it. You don't have to have all the things that we typically kind of twist ourselves up into. Is approximation is okay as long as you're using the metrics that they trust and that they understand. They will be more open to accepting those. Let's talk about the aligning the learning and performance activities. So I'm going to take you through one that we've done here in the past, which is, so if the goal, the primary objective is to increase yearly sales by, let's say, 30%. So what are the incremental contributors to success? So we look at increasing the number of cold calls made, increasing the new qualified leads, decreasing customer attrition, increasing new customers closed, increasing relationships with the existing customers. So you start to look at all of those things to increase sales by the 30%. Now, in sitting down with the business leader, you start to say, well, here are the initiatives, the incremental contributors to it, and what percentage do they feel of each of those initiatives are going to contribute to that 30%. The next thing you need to do is look at what can L&D do to be able to support that. What are you going to own? So out of that 30%, what are you willing to say, we will own these things that will help impact the three of these things? Sales takes one, marketing takes another. So when we start to look at these things, we say, okay, so now let's break it down a little bit further. So L&D will design customer service support training program and performance support, design a sales training program. So when you start to look at it, you say, listen, we don't own the entire initiative. We know that. We are going to take ownership of a percentage of it. And then we know the other folks, the other parts of the business, are also going to be part of it. So when you look at L&D and marketing and sales and everybody that's involved, they're going to own a piece of it. Now, this gets back to the whole conversation around we can own parts of it. Here's what we need from the business to be able to make those things happen. And I always like to use as an easy part of the conversation is when you look at a technology rollout. So a technology rollout, if you're brought into the table early in the process, learning and development is typically the tail of the dog. So you have, let's say, on a nice project, you have 2 months to develop the program while the technology is in its soak period. But if there are delays in the development, typically what happens is it starts to gobble up time that the learning and development team has to do their development efforts or their change management or their communication efforts. All those things start to get gobbled up because the go live date doesn't change. Well, that's a time where you can go back to the business and say, listen, when we first came here, we negotiated that we had a 2-month window to have this conversation here, or to be able to have our development time. So because this time is constricting and we can't move that end date, if you move the end date, great, but if you can't move that end date, we need to renegotiate really what it is that we're willing to take ownership of, because they've changed the rules that you've both agreed to in the beginning. And it's okay to go back there and have that conversation with them, because if you have the conversation early, then as you start to kind of work through it, the conversations at the end will then be that much easier, because they know that this is a business relationship that you're having with them. Timeline and investment required. So that's the next thing you need to do, is really talk about what are the timelines that they need to have. What is the internal and external resourcing requirements that you need to have in there? So not only within the L&D team, but from subject matter expertise, from vendor support, from all those types of things. And then what is the required financial investment? Now, this investment doesn't necessarily have to be external vendor support. It can also be, what is the true cost of learning? So you're going to be taking people away from their jobs for a period of time. What is the cost to the business to have them do that when you're looking at the solutions that you're providing? Determining alternatives. So you want to present them with the alternatives. So when we talked early on about going through and coming up with some ideas and what are the alternatives that you have, you want to provide them with the alternatives and the risks, because they're going to come up with alternatives anyways as you're having the conversation. And if you show them that you've been very thoughtful about what it is that you're presenting to them, it allows the stakeholders to make a more informed decision. So what are the alternative solutions that you considered, and the benefits and shortcomings of each one of those that you looked at? What are the challenges with the current plans being recommended? So you have a certain plan that you're going to recommend, or a certain solution you're going to recommend. What are the current challenges? So there, nothing is perfect, but what are some of the challenges that you see? Is it resource? Is it buy-in? What is it that's going to cause the issue? And then how do you recommend that you mitigate those risks? So how are you going to look at the organization as a whole and say, listen, here are the gaps. Here's what we need to be able to help mitigate that. So do you need leadership support? Do you need to bring in additional resources? So what are those additional things to help mitigate the risks that you've identified early? And then what are the additional gaps? So as you put in the solution, are there additional gaps that you need to be aware of? So if you're implementing something internally, so your new workflow that's being implemented internally, or your new metrics and measurement, or your quality management, what are the additional gaps? So we were just talking with a client recently about metrics and measurement. Well, metrics and measurement goes beyond just implementing metrics and measurement, because it does expose your entire end-to-end process. So what does that mean? So the gap is, we may have some gaps in workflow, we may have some gaps in utilization, we may have some gaps in resource management, finance, all these things. Those are some additional gaps that you need to let them know that you might uncover as you're implementing something inside of your organization. And then what do you need from them? So it's as part of this to help mitigate the risk, what is it specifically you need from them to be able to be successful as you go through this? So what type of oversight, what type of support do you need? What types of things are required from them so that they understand how engaged they need to be at the process? Is it that they just need to write a check? Is it that they just need to give you the high sign that you can move forward? What is it specifically that you need from them to move forward with the plan beyond, just giving the approval or giving money? So do they need to, be a communications vehicle for you? Do they need to be a change champion for you? Do they need to provide air cover if something goes sideways? Those are the types of things you need to talk about early and often. So lastly, just to kind of summarize, you need to make sure, so as we look through this from a summary standpoint, is it's unbelievably important that you lead with the ask and you have a clear expectation for the meeting.